All right, so hey everybody, today I'm here with Justin again, and Justin's been learning French with MIA for about a year, but a total of 2 years of French learning.
Mhm.
And if you've seen the video, you know all about his journey and his like recommendations on how to learn French and all of that. Today we're back to talk about differences between Spanish and French and any other topics that we missed last time. It's not just limited to that, but that's going to be
Mhm.
the main kind of area of conversation here. Now, Justin, I haven't planned anything. I don't know if you had areas of, you know, things that you want to talk about, but we could just go ahead. Free flow, man.
Yeah. Well, I guess I think we sort of touched on it before, but I'm sure there. So one thing I've noticed as I've studied French more and more is that the more I learn, the more I realize how much more there is to learn, and not just in vocabulary, but just the tiny little corners of the language that somehow I've never learned. Even like little things like pronunciation, for example. Like in the Parisian accent of French, they do
Mm-hmm.
this weird thing where so I'm sure they have the vowel in Spanish where it's like E.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, to say here, one of the ways is to say ici in French.
Uh-huh.
But in Paris, a lot of people will do kind of like a h sound at the end of every E. They'll go ici
Okay.
or merci. It's like this really weird sound, but I never noticed until someone mentioned it. And then all of a sudden I started to hear it everywhere. And
Ah.
it's like I realized there's just all these like little weird, tiny niggling parts of the language, but it's like it doesn't feel good to not know them at the same time. So I guess I don't know about you, but how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you've mastered Spanish grammar, or do you feel like you're constantly learning these tiny little corners?
Yeah, definitely the latter. I mean, there's, I don't think I don't know if it's just kind of like a perfectionist mindset or anything, but I
Hmm.
feel so stupid in Spanish just because I'm learning something new every day.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's words here and there, like they're just so common, or you think you would know them because it's
Right.
just so, I don't know. I mean, for example, like I forgot the word for duck in
Right.
Spanish, but it's pato.
Sure.
But I mean,
Right.
it's not a word that you're going to use every day, but it is a
No.
word that
No.
I feel like a 5-year-old should know. So it's just those little kind of things that bring up that feeling of like, oh my god, I honestly don't know what the hell's going on. But yeah, I mean, in terms of
Right.
accents, I'm learning new things every day. Grammar for sure. I can't think of anything specifically right now that I just
Right.
learned, but I mean, it's there. I mean, yesterday I know for sure I had a realization, but I can't remember it exactly. I was watching
Yeah.
Supernatural, so.
Right. Yeah, it is funny though. Like I sometimes I feel outraged that I don't understand it yet. I'm like, how dare this language? Like I thought I knew everything at this point, but then it's like this little thing like um yeah, there's these little details. Like sometimes um oh what was it? Again, it's like these little things that come up and then you forget kind of afterwards. But I'm sure if it came up again and then immersion does its thing and eventually it becomes natural. But yeah, all those little like tiny little niggling, especially like with books, like
Hmm.
with like the spoken language, I feel like I find this a little bit less. It's usually the accents and just comprehending it is more difficult and like the sometimes expressions and stuff. But especially reading, I'll every single time I open up a book, I'm like, wow, like all these little details. I'm like it's probably going to take me another like I don't know 100, 200, 300, 400 books. I don't know when I'm going to
Wow.
finally like feel comfortable
Uh
like
huh.
reading and again for me it's like for some reason I have this like idea that like I want to be able to read about as good as in English,
Hmm.
which is like it's funny. There's such a huge difference between reading books and understanding the story and understanding almost everything, and then understanding it with like the comfort and ease that you can in English. It's
Right.
like an order of magnitude bigger, and like that just requires not only all the tiny bits of vocabulary like duck or you know uh, like the specifics that don't come up very often, but they're really obvious. Um, like I forgot the word for. I was doing an Anki card and I forgot the word for dishwasher,
Uh huh.
and
Yeah.
I was like, and I'm like, oh, and now I remember it's la vaisselle is
Right.
in French, but which is funny because like that's literally just wash dishes,
Yeah.
but
Exactly. Same in
but
Spanish. I think it's lavaplatos. Something like
yeah,
that.
and but I just forgot it in the moment, and but again, it's like the difference between active and passive vocabulary as well. Like if I had heard
Right.
it in a show, I probably would have or read it in a book, I probably would recognize it. But it's like why isn't that in my active vocabulary yet? Like why not? How dare this language not be in my brain yet?
Yeah.
But again, it's like, I think that's, again, it's like the immersion thing and just getting more exposure. But again, it's like, how often do I ever talk about dishwashers anyways? So it's not
Exactly.
that important, but it still feels frustrating. It's like, I want that, even though it's kind of useless at the same time. So,
No, so I mean,
yeah.
I feel exactly the same way. And although I know you've read way more than I have, so I wanted to kind of ask you, like, are there so in Spanish there are
Yeah.
accents on words, right? So you'll see
Yeah,
it on
true.
an O, I, whatever on the vowels and
Sure.
all that.
Yeah.
Now there's only a max of 100 words that I actually know where the accents go on. Most of the words that I can actively speak or even passively recognize in conversation,
Yeah.
I have no idea if they have an accent or not. Does French have any sort of grammatical kind of, function like that maybe you haven't acquired yet that you think that it would, kind of like get absorbed or acquired through reading, or is it just mainly audio or comprehension
Mhm.
that you're kind of, feeling not too sharp with?
Are you talking about accents as in like spelling, or is that something different
No, I'm
entirely?
sorry. The a tilde. Do you know what a tilde is? Like over the
I
N.
don't. I,
Um,
uh, I guess maybe we don't have this in French, but can you maybe explain it, and then maybe
yeah,
I could
yeah. So
see if it's in
like,
French?
I mean, what's a good word? I can't remember a word in Spanish right now with an accent. I'm blanking, but like the little apostrophe over an O or an I or something like that, which it changes the actual sound of Spanish
Hmm.
with the spoken word, but the word can be written the exact same, but one little apostrophe changes the way it sounds. So, for example, there's pena, which is P-E-N-Y, which has the little tilde
Okay.
over
Right.
A, and then there's pena, P-E-N-A. So that
Right.
sounds, it's the same word, how do you say that word?
Orthography.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same word
Yeah.
orthography,
Right.
but just one little accent changes the way the word sounds. Is there anything sort of like that in
So
French?
it changes the pronunciation, but the word is the same.
Yeah, the letters are the exact same.
So what is there like a lexical difference as a result, or what happens when you change it? Is it purely pronunciation? Like why does this
Pronunciation.
exist?
Right.
So why does this exist then?
I don't
Is
know.
it
I don't know.
Oh, that's so
It
weird.
changes also
No.
a stress. Like the stress
Oh,
concentration on a word will change depending on where the accent mark is placed. So in some
actually,
conjugations, the
yeah.
the word will be the exact same, but like if it's a
Mhm.
past tense, the conjugation
Yeah.
of I believe it's man, I can't remember right now, but like a past okay, like mato to kill.
Hmm.
So I
Right.
kill someone, but
Right.
the past tense for someone else, the third person past tense for killing
Right.
someone is el mató, which is the exact same word lexically, but the
Yeah.
the the phonography changes because of the accent on the last O, so the stress
So
changes.
so in that context, that accent actually does change the meaning. It changes the
Exactly.
tense.
Right.
But then, are there some words where you have the accents, but it doesn't seem to change anything, like for nouns or something, or maybe there's like certain context, maybe, or maybe it
Um,
just you're not sure yet.
I'm not too sure, but I know it's
Okay.
it's an important part of the language that I personally haven't acquired yet. I was wondering if
Okay.
French has any other like challenges like that. If
Oh,
like
I
because
mean, like, yeah,
go
like
ahead. Sorry.
there's tons, but yeah, there's definitely. I don't think anything like that. I mean, conjugations can be difficult in French because, um, well, it's probably like in Spanish where there's like six or seven different pronouns, and they typically I mean, it's difficult sometimes because sometimes the pronunciation will be the same across all
Hmm.
of them. And so in French, for example, we don't drop the pronouns ever. Like you always say he did this instead of just the verb. I'm pretty sure that's in Spanish. Like you'll drop the pronouns and just have the verb.
Yeah.
Is
Hmm.
that true? Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Both
because we
drop
definitely don't.
language.
Yeah, because we don't have that because in French, just because often between the conjugations, the pronunciation is the same, but the spelling changes.
Okay.
So and so that's the thing. But in terms of like things that are like difficult, but for some reason just I've never like acquired.
Uh huh.
Definitely for me, it's connecting words. Like there's little words, connecting words for some. It's hard to explain in English, I guess. But there's little connecting words sometimes connecting different parts of the sentence that I understand it intellectually, and I can understand it when I read this sentence, but I could never reproduce it. And it doesn't. It's like you understand it, but there's sort of a distance. Like you read the sentence, you understand the message completely, pretty much, but it just doesn't enter your brain like one for one. I don't know. There's like kind of a layer of sort of interpretation almost. Like you're kind of like you're looking at a painting that's like a little abstract almost. That's what it kind of feels like for me sometimes. Like I understand what it's trying to express. So there's little things like that. And then for me, always, it's more like production. But for me, grammatical gender is something I've always like.
Yeah.
it's been the thing I've been thinking about for such a long time because I'm like, is this something that really like an English speaker can actually acquire in French? And because it's such a weird thing, and it's so natural from native speakers the way they conjugate. Because in French, I'm sure it is in Spanish, where verbs change as well. Sometimes adjectives change, and in French it can be really complicated because depending on how you construct the sentence, you have to adjust the spelling, and it doesn't adjust the pronunciation anyway, but just the spelling.
Really?
If you rearrange the sentence, and it depends. So I'm sure they have it in Spanish, but for past tense, one of the past tenses, it's actually a combination of verbs. So it's an auxiliary verb and then the past participle.
Yes.
And so in French we have they're either the verb to be or the verb to have plus the actual verb that you're talking about. And whether you adjust this, you add like an e at the end if it's feminine, or leave it blank if it's masculine, and whether the order of the sentence and whether something goes before the other thing, you have to adjust like the spelling and stuff. It's a real mess, and it's kind of notorious in French actually. Even French native speakers mess it up, and some people argue like it's this artificial grammar rule and that we should probably just stop worrying about it. But at the same time, there's this sort of prestige in French of like, French is this sort of like jewel of a language with all these intricate rules, and you have to do them all, and otherwise you're a real like dummy. And so that's a real controversial thing, I think, in like the written language. French people really think their language. I mean, I love it. I think it's a great language, but I think they really think of it as this like almost like this like work of art that must be like revered. Whereas in English, I feel like we just don't care. In English, we care so little about our language. I feel like
it's a mutt language.
It really is, and we care. Like I certainly don't care about it. People just care so little about like the integrity of the English language. Like some people do, but compared to like the French people, the way they talk about it, it's like amazing. Like I'm not sure what it's like in Spanish, but people talk about it like it's like this perfect jewel with all these little pieces connected. But in reality, like in the real world, when people actually like the way they talk, it's so different from the way like people like I have this idea. In fact, I feel like people in France, they really think that when they talk and they talk in a very casual way, that they're like corrupting their language. That like they're taking like the language of Voltaire and like these like philosophers and Rousseau and stuff, and they're like corrupting into something ugly.
Vulgar.
Yeah, exactly.
Vulgar Latin.
But
which is funny, right?
I mean, yeah, that's because that's where it comes from. But so it's a really weird, like, because I certainly don't have that attitude about the language, and coming from English, we don't care about our language in any way. So I don't know what are the attitudes towards the language from Spanish speakers, either from your observations, either like in Mexico or in Spain itself, or wherever.
Honestly, like I feel like the Spanish speakers are just like us. They talk so much shit about their own language. I've seen so many memes making fun of Spanish itself. And, my friends, like my personal friends, like in-person friends, they're like, yeah, I just speak the really shitty version of Spanish. They tell me I speak more like formally than them. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I might be because I've been reading, right? And there's sometimes where like, I can hear people talking between each other in casual daily conversation, and I'm like, oh shit, is this a different language? Because I literally sometimes cannot understand what's going on. So it's not there's no kind of pride, I would say, but it's not like a lack of pride. It's just like in English, we don't really care. I mean, as long as you get the point across, that's it. And it's funny that this actually happens across different countries. I mean, there's so many Spanish-speaking countries. Each person or each country has their own kind of vernacular, obviously, but the way they speak, there's some arguments. Okay, so there's two arguments here. There's an argument between the first or the third person pronoun, which is lo. You can call someone lo, or there's lo la, le, which is an indirect pronoun. And some people say that if you call someone with a third person direct pronoun with le, that's wrong. But I don't know exactly where that is. I interchange them both, and everyone understands me. I believe it's in Spain where they use lo, and in Latin America they use le, but it's the exact same thing. No one cares if you say that. And then there's also the first person past tense, I've gone somewhere. So in Spain, instead of saying fui, which means I went, they say he ido, which isn't technically correct, but they say it, right? It's just like, I believe in English, I gotta go. I'm not sure if that's correct itself. It has to be I have to go. But people say I gotta go. I mean, it's not a hard one rule or something like that. You know what I mean? So there's things like that, but the language doesn't have that kind of, I don't know if you would describe it as arrogance, but yeah, arrogance, you know.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it is weird. Like, I mean, like the French, like, again, these are all my cultural observations are purely through TV. So, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Like, it's like I watch TV, I'm like a scientist, like thinking like, or like an anthropologist, thinking like, oh, this is how culture. Like, one thing I noticed in France is that like parents like slap their kids like in public, like a shocking amount in TV, and it could just be in TV. Like, I'm not saying this is actually what culture is like in France, but it's happened enough where I start to like wonder, like, is this like at least slightly more acceptable than say in Canada or the United States? Because if that happened in like an American TV show, like it would be a big part of the episode instead of like that like 5-second blip in the episode, you know, like, it's like those little things. But yeah, I mean, like, for example, like the education system, it's very strict in France, and I know mostly about France. Like, I don't honestly know that much about Quebec. I've eventually I want to learn more, but most of my immersion stuff is from France. So these are my observations, and it's kind of neat because France is very much a different culture, and so it's kind of interesting that way. Quebec, in many ways, even though it is like kind of its own insulated culture, I think it does share a lot of cultural similarities with the rest of Canada. But like, for example, in like the French education system, it's very strict from what I can see, and very like rigid. Like they learn grammar like a second language learner would learn grammar. Like they learn everything. Like in like a very, again, it's almost like a mathematical formula to them, or like they're like constructing it, like their sentences out of marble, like very like proper. And again, it's like this, it's like a pride, but I think also maybe it comes from like the way like France was this like cultural institution for so long in the world. And really, in reality, I never thought about it until very recently, but French is really actually kind of a niche language really in this world. Like outside of like France, Quebec, Belgium, and Switzerland, it's like that's pretty much it. And most of those are not major countries, and there is some in Africa.
Right. I was gonna ask about that.
But it's a little, now again, I don't know a ton about French in Africa, but from what I can tell and what I read a little bit, it's kind of like English in India is probably the best way to explain it. In the sense that like the vast majority of Indians, for example, speak Hindi or other Indian languages. But the prestige language that you learn as a second language in school, and if you want to go into government or business, is English. And I think that's a lot of the case in the former French colonies, that French is this language that you learn in school, but there are actually very few native French speakers in African countries. I mean, there are, but it's just not, that's my impression. But that's not for all African countries, and I think there are countries with plenty of French speakers, but I will say I'm a little ignorant about that. But,
I was going to ask you. I mean, I believed originally that French was kind of like the lingua franca, almost equal to English in Africa. And I was going to ask you what kind of content maybe that you found in French from African countries. Like, well, first of all, like one of the most famous writers in French, his name is Camus or Camus. He wrote like The Outsider, I think it's called in English, or L'Étranger, and he's written some other books. Super famous philosopher and writer and stuff. Albert Camus. And he like a great writer, and he originally came from Algeria, and but as like a white French person. So like it's kind of like there's the white part of Algeria, and then there's the colonized, I guess, part of Algeria in a sense. And so in a way, he's there's kind of two parts of Algeria. Is it Algeria? Maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I'm mixing my countries up. North African country,
Yeah, North Africa. But yeah, and and so technically, like his work, he is from like he was born there and stuff. And a lot of his books are set there. Like he wrote a book. Actually, it's very applicable to our current situation. It was called The Plague, or La Peste in French, and it's about this one town that gets shut down by a plague. And it's like eerie how similar it is to our current situation. That book, like the bored, like I didn't like reading the book very much. It was kind of boring, but like the boredom and malaise and like the like despair of that book is like to a T exactly our current situation. But anyways, like that's kind of an exception because he's not really like African, in a sense, like that's where his roots were, like culturally. But but in terms of content, no, I can't say I've actually watched too much of African content. Although I will say though, like I've seen a few movies with like there's like a movie called The African Doctor where this like person from an African country moves to like the French countryside, and the kind of like cultural clash of like, and it was set in like the 60s or 70s, so they didn't really welcome him very much. And it was interesting to see kind of like the difference. I will say though that African accents are way easier to understand than a lot of other accents. Is one like it depends on where, but a lot of the times I find it way more articulate and way more clear to understand compared to like a Parisian accent or something like that, which is just all mush. But yeah, so I mean, I will say, I haven't like really like a TV show from Senegal or a movie from Senegal. It's like I haven't really explored that much, but I've really been mostly focused on French stuff, like from France. But I definitely in the future want to explore different parts. But what kind of content have you generally immersed in? Is it a specific country? Is it a specific strategy you have in terms of focusing on one and then spread out? Is it kind of random? How do you feel about the different parts? I'm curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's definitely been random. I know a lot of advice is given to beginner Spanish speakers that you should kind of focus on one accent so you can kind of perfect that country's vernacular and accent down. But I haven't done that. I've specifically just watched content that appealed to me, and there's a lot of debate, I guess, between Spanish speakers against what is the most neutral accent. The answer there is no. Obviously, there's no, right? It's all relative, which is kind of unfortunate in Spanish, but it's also in English. There's New Zealand, there's the Indian accent. Do you say that's an accent compared to the British accent or the American accent? It's just they're different varieties, right? I've but I've tended towards content from Spain just because there's more. I think there's more money there. There's some kind of more. There's more opportunity to create. There's more YouTube creators from Spain, I would say, that I've found personally interesting compared to from Latin America or, from even the richer countries like Mexico or Chile. I haven't really found too much content from there. So my Spanish has tended towards the Spanish side of things. But curiously or interestingly enough, I've got more comments saying my Spanish sounds Mexican than any other country in the Spanish speaking world. I don't know why. It might just be that I've been exposed to it earlier, being here down in Houston with Spanish speakers, my friends being Spanish speakers, although we never really interacted in that sort of way. But yeah, it might just be that.
Maybe, I don't know if you're ever exposed to it when you're younger, but it could just be like it maybe just got impressioned on you just from a very early age, maybe, and then you just kind of stayed with you and just subconsciously. I don't know when you've been in Houston for, but
that's my theory. Like that's actually what I'm going for. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that I've spent most of my time in Spain, quote unquote, but I have a Mexican sounding accent. I guess my second theory is that I guess it's not really a theory. I think it's a phenomenon in language learning. You kind of force an accent much more than it should be when you're speaking because, at least for me, that if I don't do it, I'll sound super American. I'll speak like super English with the English phonetics and all that. The accent that's been imprinted, I guess, from popular culture has always been a Mexican accent. And so that's what I think. Specifically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think people have talked about because like accent is so. I mean, all parts of language is subconscious, but I think accent, especially when you're in the flow of conversation, has to be like the most unconscious of all of them. Right. And that's what's so tricky about developing an accent because there's things you can do consciously, like shadowing, of course, and doing lots of listening. But at the end of the day, when you're talking with someone, it just comes out, and whatever comes out comes out.
Right.
And I don't know about you. Have you found, like, for me, even though I haven't done really very much speaking, I have found, like, even without any speaking whatsoever, like little by little, the accent seems to like get closer and closer to just naturally better. Like I just found that I've naturally started to pronounce words better. But I will say though, yeah, like I actually haven't listened to myself in like over a year of how I actually sound. So it's possible I sound really bad. I mean, I do. Like, but like even like I haven't improved, but I'm sure I have, because like it does feel like as I listen to my voice in my head, it does feel like I'm hitting the vowels a little bit better. And again, it's like the problem is like there's so many vowels in French that just don't exist in English, and like sometimes I still get them confused when I listen. Like I'll hear, like there are tons of words that they're only distinguished by those vowel sounds that do not exist in English. So like for example, cancer in French, for example, is cancer, but to like concert, but to be together or like a concert, for example, would be concert.
Oh,
so
wow.
concert.
Wow.
Concert. Or like, for example, if you wanted to say like it's when, like what time, you'd say c'est quand. Or if you wanted to say you're an idiot, you'd say t'es con.
Oh,
so like
wow.
they sound like, when you first started, like they literally sound identical to my ear.
Right.
And I'm not probably like, I'm trying not to overly enunciate it, and my vowels are not super accurate, but it's that kind of thing, especially like when it's at a mile a minute, like what'll happen is like I'll hear a word, I'm like, wait, from that context that makes no sense, it must be the other vowel, and then I'll understand it. And that happens quite a lot, especially between those two particular vowels that I just mentioned, con and con. Like they sound like con and con. Like again, I'm not doing it perfectly, but that's one of the tricky, like again, that's like just one of the things. But I'm not really sure what we were talking about to get. Oh yeah, accent. But yeah. So in terms of like my accent, like again, it's I just listen to a lot of French stuff from France, but yeah, in terms of like neutral accents, sometimes people talk about like neutral French as like Parisian French. But it couldn't be farther from the truth. Like Parisian French is very, very particular, and sometimes it sounds like I'm like making fun of people from Paris. I mean, everyone in France outside of Paris does, but like the accent is very particular. Just and the types of words they use as well, and the speed that they talk, and the way they cut words and stuff. It is very particular. Like the most neutral apparently is a place called Toulouse in France. Which I don't know where it is precisely, but some people say it's like the most like neutral. But yeah, there really is no, like, I would say, standard bearer of French. Like I guess like when you hear on the news, I guess would be considered neutral, but that's pretty artificial, I would say.
So I mean, how different is I guess the French that you hear from Paris? I'm guessing there's more content and more just kind of information coming out of Paris and maybe even the rest of France or the rest of the world. So how dominant specifically is that accent in media, or even between people that you talk to? I mean, how common have you found the Parisian accent?
Again, it's tricky because it's hard to know precisely like where all actors like come from. Like I've definitely watched shows and movies and stuff set in Paris, and there's this very like, I don't know, very pronounced Parisian accent. In a way, it reminds me very much of like a New York accent. Like not precisely in the way it sounds, but there's a certain aspect to it that, like that distinction, like when you think of a stereotypical New York accent compared to sort of a neutral accent, that's like how it feels like in the way it's different. And like, yeah, in terms of like, probably like the most money is in Paris, in that area. And like people tend to make fun of people in the far north and the south of France, or people in the countryside, like those accents, they're pretty pronounced, and people will often make fun of them. And yeah, I would say probably most actors that come outside of Paris probably adopt sort of a somewhat neutral accent instead of like a true Parisian accent. But I mean, like I watched stuff from like Belgium, for example, which doesn't sound that much different from the rest of France, but it's definitely way easier to understand. Like I watched this like Belgian show, and I'm like, wow, I can like understand like almost everything in this show. This is incredible. I'm like, am I just good at French now? And then I watched this like show, like I think set in Paris, and I'm like, wow, I understand like hardly any of this. And so it's like, it's just so different. Like, it's just very, very hard to understand Parisian and French. And, so that's the problem. Like a lot of the French content does come from Paris. And so a lot of it's very hard to understand. But but it's good. I mean, it's good for your ears. But
So would
I
you
would say, yeah.
recommend specifically a beginner start with like, or try and focus on Parisian content and kind of move out from there, or does it happen more naturally just because there's more content coming out of Paris?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about like beginner content, dubs are probably the best because that would be probably the most like neutral accent or like cartoons. I would
Okay.
say like there's this like again, it's hard to describe like exactly what neutral even means honestly in this context. But if I had to say like dubbed content, actually it depends. Like some like weird like Netflix shows like they like when they talk trying to sound more casual, but it's dubbed is really odd, very strange. It doesn't sound anything
Really?
like real life.
Uh-huh.
But like I like typical shows or like anime sometimes it's very neutral and that kind of thing. Dubs and anime or like animation in general, just it sounds pretty like kind of down the line, pretty straightforward, less mumbly, less uh, like squishing words together and stuff. So yeah, I would say like dub content is definitely like what I would recommend if you're just trying to get into it. Like I mentioned in my like update video, Star Trek is like a nice way to get started, just because I mean, first of all, it's really unnatural, but it's super super duper clear. But yeah, it's like in a way it doesn't really prepare. I don't know your experience actually, but sometimes like listening to easier content doesn't seem to prepare me for the harder content, in
Yeah.
a way. Like I don't know about you, but like it's like, I always had the impression like, oh, if you listen to a lot of the easy stuff and then you kind of level up with that, and then when you go to the harder stuff will feel easier. But it never seems to work out that way. It always feels like I listen to the easy stuff, I start to get better and better at it, and then I switch to like a harder show and I'm like, well, this is still hard.
Right.
But it doesn't seem to work, but it works the opposite way though, in a way better. Like I'll listen to a lot of hard stuff and then I'll switch to something easy, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is like I can understand way more of this than I feel like I could before. So
Hmm.
I don't know about your experience about like improving your listening comprehension, but I still don't have a firm idea of like what is the optimal strategy for improving your listening. Is it like kind of build it up from easy to hard? I know a lot of people recommend that, or like does it literally just not matter? Because I kind of feel like it just literally doesn't matter, but I don't know. What is your thoughts on this?
So I think that's part of a more like profound question on whether you should listen to content that's easy for you or just whatever, just dive right into native content, right? Just because and I know like it's hard for me. I'm trying to clarify my thoughts more on this because I guess when we're kids and we're babies, we're still absorbing phonetics of our language, but we're spoken
Sure.
to in baby talk a lot of the time, right? The interaction with our parents is more simplified. They're not going to speak straight up sentences to us, right? Or speak as fast
Right.
as they normally would. Um, my experience has been what you've said. So I started one of the hardest shows for me was watching La Casa de Papel. It was
Oh yeah,
for some reason, yeah,
love that show. I watched every season in the French dub. It's great.
it's amazing. But
Yeah.
the way they speak is super mumbly. It's so
Is it?
hard to like understand in Spanish, like the proper Spanish.
Oh yeah,
That I
like
was
the
just like,
dub's pretty easy in French actually. I would
is
say
it?
like
Okay,
oh
well,
yeah,
good, good. I
yeah,
mean, dude, in Spanish it was ridiculous. But I found that
yeah.
like after 8 months of I got through the show. I believe I just put on English subtitles because I gave up. I was like, fuck, the show is so amazing. I'm just gonna watch it for pleasure, not even think of it in
Yeah,
Spanish immersion, right?
yeah, absolutely.
So I just kind of gave up on that.
Right,
And then I didn't specifically use it to train or anything, but the content I was using was more of the same mumbly kind of fast speaking shows from Spain or YouTube. I'm sorry, YouTube from
right,
Spain. So it's not clear audio like it should be during a TV series or anything like that. When
right.
I came back to La Casa de Papel, my comprehension was above 95%. I was
Oh,
incredibly shocked. Like I could
wow.
understand almost everything, and I think
Right,
that was due to not my vocabulary increasing or anything. It was literally just
right,
watching content from Spain, with natives speaking like they normally would, mumbling words and just getting through what they're trying to say. So
right,
kind of pushing that envelope even to things I didn't understand, and coming
right,
back to some things that should have been more clear. And I should be more clear on this. I think La Casa de Papel was a little less difficult than the stuff I was listening to. So I mean, just kind of pushing it up, and then coming back down, increased
right,
my comprehension like insane. So it was.
right.
I think I would have to agree with you on that. So that's been your
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. I mean, it's purely subjective, but and I know a lot of people swear by the start with like even if it's native content stuff for
Hmm.
kids, and then like slightly harder shows, and then work your way up to the hard shows. But again, my experience is that it doesn't feel like that's the most optimal route. It really does feel like you just kind of struggle through the hard stuff,
Right.
try to enjoy it as best you can,
Right.
and then like you watch like an animated show or something with like easier, and then you're like, wow, I just like understand like that entire TV show because
Exactly.
and whereas and like it is weird, and like I don't know, like again, like with like listening, it's like you're constantly working. Like what will happen sometimes is there'll be like a phrase that like I'll like kind of like understand like kind of the broad contours of it. Like I'll kind of hear the beginning and the end, and I kind of roughly know what it means. And then it's like little by little, I kept on hearing it, hearing it. It's like my brain is like working on it, gets clearer and clearer until it's like my brain finally cracks it. And then like I'm like, and then I learned it, and like and it's like I don't know if it would have been faster if I like but that's like stuff that I like didn't even like read or like or looked at subtitles. It's just purely audio. And like I know people say like if you read it first and then you like try and listen for it, it'll be faster. But I don't know, like because sometimes it just feels like listening and learning the language through like your ears. It's just a different thing than reading, just completely different. And like it just feels on a visceral level totally different. Like because like I've said like if I read read the subtitles when I watch a show, I could understand it close to 100%, or that's what I would say. But in reality, I feel like maybe my level was not as high as I think, because if I can't hear it and I can't like immediately understand it, maybe it just wasn't acquired. Maybe like I was intellectually understanding the subtitles or reading it and I could understand the message, but I didn't really like understand it. Like it didn't really seep into the deepest parts of my brains. Right. If I can't hear it, maybe I literally don't understand it.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that's exactly why I basically never use Spanish subtitles when watching Spanish content. Because I felt like if I did that, I would be kind of just lying to myself, saying, "Okay, I understood it." Right. Even though I might learn pronunciation, but Spanish pronunciation's super simple. It's much more simple than English, I would say. But I would have felt like a fraud. I think if I needed the subtitles to kind of give me that leg up. And my listening comprehension has increased dramatically without ever having to use subtitles. So I don't know exactly if I can give a fair comparison, a subjective comparison using subtitles or not. But I could tell anyone listening right now that learning without subtitles works, because I've done it. You don't need the subtitles. If you just kind of learn vocab as you go and just keep listening, that's literally all I've done. I haven't done any special things. I've read less than 2 books in Spanish.
Hey, you read 2 though. That's good.
Yeah, so that's it. I mean, it's not the thing with language learning. It just takes time, and I think the hardest part is being consistent and actually focusing on what you're trying to do. But other than that, I honestly think it's one of the simplest things on earth. A lot of people just overcomplicate it, I guess. I don't know what you would say about that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like again, I have many minds on this, because like especially when you progress into like novels, the language is like in French, it's like language is so vast, like it's enormous. And like when you like again, if you're just going for like basic conversational ability, it's actually not that huge. In fact, like language is close to like English. It's not that big of a journey. Like it really isn't. It's a pretty small journey. But it's like when you realize like if you're going for like the highest levels or like near native, if that's like I don't know what my final ultimate goal is. I really don't. But like there's just so much out there, and like I don't know what this has to do with listening comprehension, I guess. But but yeah, like like. I don't even know what we were talking about, but I guess what I'll say is that I don't know. I lost the thread of thought. I don't know what I was even talking about. But what were we talking about before I went off? You were
what was it? I actually forgot too.
Oh, you're talking about reading. You're talking about listening.
Yeah.
And you're talking. Oh, it's very simple, right? Yeah. It's weird because it's like the languages are so complex and there's just so much to learn constantly. But yeah, I would agree. Like the process itself, it's much more like physical fitness than it is an intellectual activity.
Exactly.
It's like it's not at all an intellectual activity, really. Like I mean, there is a conscious component. There is like thinking about it, and that can help, and that's interesting. Like I don't know about you, but it is interesting to learn about the nuts and bolts of the language little by little. Like not like not as a like almost just you're curious, like, oh, the fact that this word can transform into this in this context, and like in this time of period they would use these type of verbs differently and stuff, and like all that stuff's really interesting. But yeah, the actual process, it's very organic. It's very just you just got to put in the time. You got to do your push-ups. You got to just listen. You got to read and eventually practice speaking and writing.
Right.
it is very much just a biological process, which, but that being said, it doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah.
It's hard because
Hmm.
it's actually hard to do it, like just to be consistent.
Exactly.
But yeah, I would say it's not at all an intellectual activity, really. I mean, that's going too far, probably, but it's really not. It's more of a physical activity, really, than a mental activity, I guess. But I don't
Right.
know.
It's just
It's
kind of like,
complicated, I guess.
I think a good metaphor is kind of like, increasing a mileage. If you're running a marathon, you got to increase your mileage to train for it. Or if you're lifting weights, you're
Right.
literally just adding weight to the bar. If you're learning a language, you're
Right.
literally just adding resources to your pool of resources to kind of, spread out and
Right.
cover more ground. Just because, like, once you read a word and you understand it immediately, that's it. You've acquired it, right? I mean,
Right.
the next step is to go find another word to kind of acquire. So it's
Right.
not, it's not. I guess it's not. I think Matt versus Japan made a good video. Language isn't math. I think
Right.
literally everything he says covers my exact thoughts on it. Like my exact experience with language. You don't need to be a grammar nerd to learn a language, but it's okay if you
Right.
are. It's
Yeah.
fine, and it'll help you actually. I think.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't like grammar. It doesn't excite me, but it's exciting to discover it when you're actually experiencing it. Like,
Right.
you're like experiencing the language, and you discover this like feature that you never noticed before, and sometimes I feel like annoyed, like that I never noticed it before. Like, how could I have not noticed that before? But then you realize, that's really interesting. That's another feature that I never noticed before. And and then you can intellectualize it a little bit, and that's cool. But yeah, it is very much like, um, yeah, it's just like, that can be interesting, but it's like linguistics and language learning are just very fundamentally different things. And
Right. Yeah.
so, but yeah. Yeah. So, how was Atomic Habits? How was your reading the book and finishing it?
I actually
What was that like?
I am very close to finishing. I'm not completely done.
Oh, you're not very close.
Yeah, yeah.
What's
No,
that like?
the thing is, I've been spending about 2.5 hours almost every day watching Supernatural, just active listening.
Right.
So just reading,
Right.
like, oh God, I gotta read. Nah, I'd just rather watch
I
this.
know.
Put my legs up and relax.
I'm kind of in that mode right now myself, actually, because again, it's like my listening is so like so much worse than my reading. Even though my reading, it's funny. I don't know if you've ever experienced like the kind of highs and lows of your ability. Like,
Yeah.
you're listening and you're like, I am so good at listening to Spanish or French, and then you listen to a show and then you're brought back down to earth. And like, I feel like I go through that like every week. Like,
Right.
but, like I probably the last time we talked, I was probably feeling pretty good about my reading and pretty bad about my listening.
Uh-huh.
And then like it'll be like the next week, and then it completely flips, and I realize, wow, I know literally nothing about reading books and like novels and what it really means to understand this stuff. But yeah, but yeah, I'm kind of in this like reading. Like I'm still reading every day, but it's definitely like, sometimes just like sitting there watching TV is, it feels lazy, but it's actually really beneficial too.
It is, yeah, and especially if you're going along with the plot itself, and you're trying to
Yeah.
like you're really focused into it. It's awesome. I mean, that's exactly what increased my listening ability to the level it's at right now. I can understand pretty much all of daily conversation, which there's almost zero kind of like, hey, what'd she say? What'd he say? There's none of
Okay.
that. But if it's news or something, it's kind of hard. But just kind of
Okay.
like pushing that envelope just really developed my listening ability into just like, okay, that's cool.
Well, yeah.
The only trouble I have is with slang, and if like I told you, if people are speaking really, really informally. That's the only thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like for me, like when I think about what are the easy things and the hard things, anytime someone's giving like a formal presentation or the news
Mhm.
or like a political debate, that stuff's like really easy, honestly, for me.
Okay.
Like, and like it could just be like there's a lot of cognates that tend to go into those domains
Right.
that are very similar between French and English. That's probably most of it. But in those contexts, they also, again, it's so funny, like they speak like the perfect form of French that like no one actually speaks in real life. It's funny, like there was a scene in a show I was watching where they were practicing for a play. They were like reciting their lines, and the partner said, "Pronounce every syllable, please, when you read it," which I thought was so funny because it's like, well, of course you would, but again, like when you speak naturally in French, you definitely don't pronounce every syllable. So like when someone's like old like period dramas are really easy to understand because they pronounce every word so crystal clear, and it's like so easy to understand. But like the news or like formal presentations and speeches, or like when the president of France gives a speech, I can understand it 100% perfectly usually. Well, there might be a word I don't know, but it's not my ears that are the problem. But yeah, it's honest. But then like, man, casual conversation, like it's like my ears just shut off. It's like it's so hard, and I'm like,
Really?
again, there's lots I do understand,
Uh-huh.
and I don't want to say that there's nothing I understand. And again, it depends on like a show from like I watched this show again, this Belgian show that I can understand pretty close, like not perfect, but I can understand the vast majority of the dialogue word for word.
Hmm.
But then again, in certain contexts, very casual. Again, especially Parisian French, it's like it's still very much a work in progress. But it feels very exciting when I can hear a whole sentence word for word and understand it
Right.
in Parisian French. But little by little, it's getting better. But it is funny, interesting, like which domains you can understand. And is it a vocabulary issue, or is it just that specific accent or inflection or whatever it is? Like teenagers in French are so hard to understand. I don't know.
Are they?
In Spanish, like they're impossible. Like they mumble to like end of the like they yeah, mumbling is definitely a teenager thing, and they speak fast as well, and don't articulate their words at all very well. So it can be quite
Wow.
challenging. Teenagers, maybe not in real life, but definitely in TV shows, it's
TV
very
shows.
challenging.
So, I mean, how
Yeah.
much of your immersion has been YouTube or like casual kind of content? Because it seems like I just kind of realized that a lot of my immersion has been more casual style, maybe I'll watch a video game commentary and they're speaking like really fast, really mumbling,
Right.
and I can understand most of it, and that's
Right.
kind of translated into actual casual daily conversation.
Right.
Maybe not super informal, like I said, like I'll hear day laborers around here in Houston, and sometimes I can't understand exactly what they're saying, maybe because they're more slurring their words or something like that.
Sure.
But maybe like a teenager, like in Spanish, I could understand that because that's the kind of content I've been, exposed to more.
Right.
And I guess the formal content has been a lack of vocabulary rather than kind of listening to what they're saying.
Right. Yeah.
So what's been your like immersion split between like TV series and YouTube?
Well, yeah, the
stuff?
YouTube. Like I want to watch more YouTube, but I don't know. It's hard for me to find YouTubes that really grab me. I mean, I don't watch a lot of YouTube in general. Like, I mean, I do, but I don't follow a lot of YouTubers. At least, I mean, like, it's like more like the educational, like edutainment stuff I like to watch. Like, like talking about science or history and stuff. And there's some. I found some channels like that in French that I like. They definitely speak a little bit more articulately than like very casual conversation stuff. Not always, but so I watch that sometimes, but it's really a pretty small part of my immersion. That it's almost always TV shows or movies. So, but I will say though that YouTube, especially when it's just people talking to the camera, it tends to be not that hard, I would say, for me. Really casual conversation back and forth, especially in TV shows and stuff. And also like the sound quality in TV shows can be difficult because you'll hear like the wind kind of go over top of their like talking, or like they'll whisper a lot sometimes in French TV shows, which is super hard to understand. But like sometimes like when people just talking to the camera, like that can be, I can understand it. Like, again, it depends on the person, but often like just word for word, 100%. But it's just very context dependent. But yeah, I don't watch that much YouTube though, I would say.
Okay. See, I was only asking just because I'm trying to like formulate what I would have done differently, specifically in Spanish. I think I've had a pretty decent mix, although my immersion has tended to kind of weigh towards YouTube, more casual, more mumbly, more slurry kind of side of the language, rather than like the dub stuff on let's say Daredevil on Netflix, like I used to watch and all that.
Right.
So I mean that was always a lot more easy to understand than obviously the YouTube stuff. So I don't know. I really don't know if it's better for an intermediate learner or like a beginner learner to start with the harder YouTube stuff, just to kind of like get I don't know, just accustomed to the way people slur words and all that, or if they should learn the more kind of clear formal side first and then kind of venture out into that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I'm still I want more information. What do you think?
About like the optimal path for developing listening comprehension?
Exactly.
From someone who has bad listening comprehension?
I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, again, because my path was, like, my first 11 months before I really started immersing was, I watched like shows like Tintin or other little shows like cartoons and audiobooks I listened to a little bit, but I just repeated them over and over again. And I didn't really make that much progress as a result because I just didn't get enough exposure. So, and then after that, I just kind of watched whatever. Like, I remember the first time I watched this one show, it's called 10%, which is about like agents in Paris. They like for like movie stars, like getting the movie roles and stuff. And I remember only understanding one word the entire first episode, which was pretty funny in hindsight. And like again, when I first started immersing, my listening comprehension was super low. But in terms of like optimal content, it's really like I don't think there is. I think it's literally just whatever. Like it's literally hours. I think that's all that matters. And that if you're like certain areas will take longer than others. And if you're struggling with an area, you just kind of have to put in the time in those areas and focus on it until it gets better. But like it tends to spread out though. Like you work hard really to understand that one little accent and the specific words they use, but then you'll find you go to other content and all of a sudden it's like you've leveled up. And so I don't think there's really an optimal route when it comes to listening, like pure listening. Now, this is because vocabulary has never been a huge issue for me. I would say that I've always felt my vocabulary was a little bit better than my listening. Like if you're in different languages where I think like vocabulary is an issue, like where there's like very few cognates, I think where you listen is probably makes a bigger difference actually. Like in Japanese, for example, like probably like if you're listening, like that makes probably like, because just sheer vocabulary is going to be a huge issue with that. But because it never felt like vocabulary was an issue, it literally didn't seem to matter ever. And like, again, because with casual conversation, there isn't that huge of a range of vocabulary, but yeah, that's what I would say. But with reading, I would say reading, I think is slightly different, but even then, like I kind of just read whatever from like, and it didn't seem to make a difference. But little by little over time, I kind of gravitated towards the new stuff. But yeah, more by more, it doesn't seem to matter, but also just like what seems to be the less painful. Like if it's really painful to do certain things, probably go towards the less painful. But that's probably personality based rather than this is the optimal method. But in terms of like if you were a robot or computer, it's hard for me from my own experience to say that it matters that much.
See, I think the most interesting point that you made was that in languages so different from English that what you listen to matters, and I think I would agree with that as well. Just because like when I first started listening to Spanish, it was just like there are a lot of words with Latin roots, like it would end in tion, like concentration or something like that. You would just understand it, or even if you read it, you would just understand it. So I think that's this is like one of the major things I'm like trying to wrap my mind around. I'm trying to learn. I mean, after this, I want to learn Italian and I want to learn Portuguese, maybe French. I'm not too sure yet, but those two for sure. So I kind of want to go into that using new strategies, if you know what I mean. Just to kind of
I mean, I think about this constantly because I like always like fantasize like once I like finish French, if that ever happens, like it's like I'd love to like learn Spanish because I feel like I could do it so much more efficiently than I did French because French was just so rough. I did it all over the place, and then like I have fantasies of learning like Russian and Chinese and stuff, but I don't know if I'll ever actually do those things. But yeah, I do fantasize sometimes like what would have been that optimal route starting from zero. Now that I like, and especially get the huge advantage of like the previous Romance language, like what would be that perfect optimal route? I guess I was thinking like if I was to actually do it like an optimal route, probably go through a grammar book and kind of like sentence mine, or even just read it, I guess, or maybe a pre-made deck, and like just kind of brute force those first like 2,000 words, and then honestly just spend a lot of time listening. I would say like when it's that close, like just it's really like and then read as well, but like I would say like just spend like. Just really emphasize from the beginning, just tons and tons of listening, and especially like TV shows and stuff. And that's probably just the most optimal method. And like probably doing more reading as well. Like I thought like, what if I like started with like subtitles and read those first for maybe like sentence mine them and do that for like a couple 100 hours so that I really just know intellectually like what the casual language is, and then just like go all out just listening and then develop it that way. That's kind of my loose strategy that I would say if I wanted to do Spanish. But I mean, I really just want to get to a really high level in French is my thing. I don't really want to dabble into. I do have the fantasy, but it's like I really do want to I just want to understand TV shows. I just really do, and be able to read books like really comfortably. And like once I can do those things and maybe output a little bit, I'll think about the other languages. But I do often fantasize though of like figuring out that perfect strategy ahead of time. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any thoughts about? If you were to like, all right, I'm just going to stop Spanish for now and just go all out in Italian. Yeah. What would you do to like optimize the process?
Awesome question, man. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to answer this, and then
Okay.
I'm going to ask you one question. Hopefully, you're probably not going to know the answer to it, but I want to hear what
Yeah.
you think. So
Yeah.
what you
Sounds good.
said, brute force the first 2,000 most common words, and then just listen a lot. That is exactly what I did in Spanish, and I think that's literally
Right.
what got me to this level. Which I'm not
Right.
saying I'm that great, but if you put me in a
Yeah.
Spanish-speaking country, I'd be 100% fine, zero problems. Like I could,
Right.
go to the bank, ask for my money, whatever, health insurance, do my own paperwork, whatever.
Right.
Um, um, if I what I'm doing right now, I've actually already started Italian, meaning
Yeah.
that I've grabbed a sentence deck, and this is one of the major differences that from which I started with Spanish. Because with Spanish, I did a vocabulary deck, so just
Right.
having words, a single word, and then its English
Right.
translation. This time I
Yeah.
started Italian with a sentence deck and its English
Okay.
translation.
Cool.
I could start it with a sentence deck because the similarities between Spanish and Italian are immense. I
Right.
could when I first started, I was already understanding 80% of Italian. Just looking at a
Okay.
sentence, I'm like, holy shit! Okay, I do
Right.
not need to do a vocab deck for this.
Right.
Just most of the sentences y plus one. So I was just
Right.
like, what
Wow.
the hell, And
Right.
the translation in English was just like seamless. And I don't even if I want to say something in Italian, which I don't know much, I don't think about the English at all. It's just that
Right.
I think about the Italian word that I learned out of that sentence and then just plug
Right.
it into the sentence. So
Right.
starting with that sentence deck is definitely going to be easier. And if
Right.
if I were to optimize it, man, I wish everyone could start with a sentence deck in the language they start with, but I think you should still start with a vocab deck if it's the first language that you're learning. So if you're learning Spanish, start with that vocab deck, and then move on after 1,000 words or so to a sentence deck, just to kind of get the sentences in your brain faster,
Right.
instead of the English translation with your
Right.
vocabulary word.
Right.
So yeah, that's my current like best impression of how to start learning a language, and like I made a video about that, and I still stick by it. I haven't changed any
Yeah.
of my thoughts on that.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. Any comments on that?
No, not really. I mean, I was always like that. I got to make my own flashcards, and that was always been my mentality from the beginning. But I have come to realize that, like, yes, it is probably less effective to use a pre-made deck.
Mm-hmm.
Convenience of being like, I'm just gonna do 20 words a day. I'm just gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be done in. There's a real simplicity to that process.
Right.
But there's a real simplicity to that process, and just like, and especially if it's close to English, that you know what, even though it's probably taking the time to actually construct these cards yourself, I think it's probably perfectly fine and probably a really good idea. So
Yep.
I can't really disagree with it. And for me to finish off the interview, or was that it?
Yeah. No. Sorry, it was a little bit. I'm kind of scared that it was lagging a little bit. But can you hear me fine? Can you hear?
Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
there's no issues over here.
Okay. All right. So you kind of like let it. This is a good segue. If you started learning Spanish, like you mentioned,
Right.
in your point of view, I know in the last interview you said it'd probably take 1,500 hours from zero to basic fluency in French.
Right.
What would you think it would take, or how many hours do you think it would take having a French background, and getting into basic fluency in Spanish? Just having that background, jumping from one Romance language to another. What do you have an estimate? Have you thought about this at all? I mean, you don't need to have a basis. You don't have to say anything. You could just talk out your ass. But just, what do you think?
I've heard the estimate that it cuts it in half. I mean, I think that's what I've heard, that it cuts the half in roughly. So if 1,500 hours, it should take 700 hours or so. Again, like the thing that I always like come back to is the listening comprehension, and like it's just this like physical process of training your brain. But I think the fact that Spanish pronunciation is basically a subset of English pronunciation in many ways, or like the vowels and the consonants and stuff are not that different. And that if you already have like a strong foundation in a Romance language, that the listening comprehension wouldn't be quite as challenging, I think, as French pronunciation. Like, again, anecdotally speaking, it does seem to take longer for people to understand natural speech in French compared to other Romance languages. That might be wrong. I don't have any scientific basis, but just anecdotally talking to listeners, it does seem like it takes longer with French, just probably because of the vowels and other things.
I've heard
and
that.
French pronunciation is scientifically wrong, but that's from my anecdotally. So I always wonder, like, so I guess what I would say is that, you know what, I would probably believe that 700 to 1,000 hours would be enough to have really good listening comprehension in French. It wouldn't take the 1,500 hours, because I'm pretty sure it's going to take me at least the 1,500 hours for French, because I was like, maybe it'll be only 1,000 hours, maybe like at my rate, but
Right.
I'm only about 300 hours away from 1,000, and it's not getting better quick enough. So I'm thinking the 1,500 is going to be pretty accurate. But yeah, I would say, like, especially like all the grammar knowledge and stuff, and not to mention all the cognates, like I would say cut it in half is like easily is probably what it would be. So I'm sure Italian, you know, if you went all out on it, I'm sure, you know, twice as quickly as Spanish did, even though, you know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I share the exact same view. You know, I've seen a chart. I think it's from Dreaming Spanish. He made you know, it should take about half of that. I don't know where he got the number from, but his 1,500 hours seems reasonable to me. So I'm gonna go with his half of the time is gonna be reasonable as well. So yeah, I mean, that's my channel. That's what I want to try and experiment with and see, you know, over the next 2-3 years, what happens with language learning and what I could do with, you know, while tracking the hours.
Yeah, I mean, if I ever finish French, I will start. I definitely will start a Spanish project, and
Awesome.
we'll see how optimal I can make it. And,
Yeah, we need data.
right.
I think all the language learning community needs data.
I'm absurdly interested in like the data of like how long immersion takes.
Right.
Like, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with it, but I'm really interested. Like, literally, just like how many books does it take to get to a high level? How many hours of listening? Like, how many movies you have to watch?
Exactly.
Like, how many Anki cards? Like, for some reason, I'm obsessed by it. But you know, it's interesting to read other people's progress, and then like, and it's also very motivating if you know that if you put 3 hours every day for 2 years, you're in comprehension in whatever in a Romance language. That's very motivating just to know that. Whereas if you're just kind of like, you got to do a lot of listening and hopefully you get good, like that feels very like it feels uncomfortable, I guess, and it doesn't feel as motivating. And knowing knowing this information, if you know, like if I just read 100 books, I know I will be very good. And because I have this data that people have found that like, actually someone did this.
Right. And it's not even just 100 books. It's specifically, I read these 100 books and I got to this level.
Yeah, and you have that like anecdotal data, and it like and I mean like I would say we know more about books than listening, because that's the thing. Like, people have done a lot of reading, and you know, generally speaking, people read I think someone did this like actual this computer simulation, and they thought like how many books would it take for you to learn 30,000 words, assuming that it takes 10 repetitions or 12 repetitions to learn a word, and it said 112 books.
Oh, wow.
Average book, which is like really inspiring to me.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
All of a sudden, it's like, because like, it's like when you think like I have to read 1,000 books or something in order to get good, but no, it's like 100. It doesn't actually seem that bad, right?
Right.
You know, if you you know, if you're not a reader, it's going to take a while, but like, you know, if you read every day, you can probably read a book every 3 weeks or so, and like that adds up pretty quickly. And like, again, you get most of the benefit of probably the first half, and then it's like slow little progress after that. But so it's like even just like 30 or 40 books, like you'll get a lot of benefit of it. But yeah, the specifics, like this data, I find very inspiring, and I think it's very useful. And also, it also helps spread immersion learning as well. Like that if you put X amount of hours, you will get good, and I think that's cool.
You know, I don't know if like I haven't heard that research point or data point before. If you know of any more data points like that, would you be willing to make a video on your channel, kind of explaining it to us? You know, like maybe what you found, or just talking about what you found.
Yeah, sure.
I would love to see that. You know.
Yeah, I mean, there was this one blog post I read, but yeah, just anecdotally about this stuff. Yeah.
Awesome, dude. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all I had for now, and I don't know if you had any other comments or anything.
Yeah. No, I mean, how is Supernatural? You liking it in Spanish?
I love it, man. Like I watched it when I was like, like 12 or 13 or whatever. And there's so many episodes I like totally forgot. So it's just a joy to go back and, rewatch them.
That was kind of like with me with Star Trek, like watching it again. Like I watched like 50 hours of that. Like one of my first shows I watched, Immersing, and it was so much fun because I vaguely knew these shows, but it was still entertaining because the language was new and stuff. And so it's a lot of fun to do that nostalgia immersion.
Exactly.
Call it. Like, it's fun. And it's like, and it's usually pretty easy because it's dubbed. So that helps as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I mean, that's all I had. Thanks everyone for
All right.
watching. I'll link Justin's channel in the description. Should be the first link. And let us know what your questions are. I mean, I know there's not that many people watching, but I mean, I just love having a discussion with people.
I would
about
like
this
to
subject.
note that my interview had the most views on your channel. I'd like to say
Yes.
that I did notice that.
Awesome. I think it was a cool.
Hopefully, exactly. We'll get views to your channel, get some more subscribers.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So yeah, it's I like I said, like that last topic, especially with finding the amount of hours, data points on immersion. That's like my entire interest, almost the entire motivation behind this channel. So, and it seems like Justin's super motivated. I'm talking to the viewers here with that. So make sure to follow Justin. I mean, he's seems like he knows a lot more than me. I haven't dug into the research on that. So I'll be awaiting that video of yours, man. I mean, that's gonna be awesome to think about or watch.
Sure.
So, anyways, guys, thank you. Appreciate it. I got to run.
Yeah. Okay.
So, all right. Signing off. Ciao.
All right. See you.